Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Luke Bonenfant, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 Porsches. 5 models of Porsche that are still undervalued, still a great value in 2022, haven't reached the peak of appreciation, or even if this excludes models that are still appreciating that, still would be considered a good investment, but, are just out of the price range for most people. This is what I think are, from my perspective, once again, not an expert, a good value and good value for money still in this market in 2022. I should say a few things beforehand. First off, I usually say this at the end of the video, but in case you guys don't make it there, please comment below any additional models or reasoning or disagree with what I'm saying, agree with what I'm saying. Start a conversation in the comments below. I really like to see people sort of debate these topics. So yeah, we're gonna start off with the base 944. All years, but mostly dependent on condition. Now, I should say that all the models I'm talking about today really only apply to manuals, although if you're into an automatic, I guess it also applies. I just don't know why you would want a Tiptronic or any transmission that was automatic before the PDK. But, if you are manually driving prohibited physically, I can understand why an automatic would be in order. So, the first one is a base 944, and I drove this car, and I'm also facing this way so you can see my 1992 Dodge Stealth behind me because it's an early 90s mid-level sports car. The 944 base was a mid to late 80s mid-level sports car. I drove my Stealth and a 944 base 86 model year back to back, and it sort of got a really good impression on what's great about these cars. I should say, they are not fast. It is a very underpowered 4-cylinder, but they look amazing. It looks exactly like the 944 Turbo, and if you can get one in a good condition, I think that they are great value still because it's an iconic looking car from the 80s. They're never gonna make anything like it again. They weigh like 2,500 pounds, which is like a Miata basically, but for a Porsche that's really awesome looking. And if you're not into speed, if you just want a car that will drive very nicely, ride like a Porsche, it really feels like a go-kart. I mean, they don't make cars that feel like this anymore. Even I drove an ND Miata, and it feels huge compared to a base 944. This car is great. You could turn them into an autocross monster. There's somebody who built an off-road version of one. They are phenomenal cars. Very fun. And after driving one, I can say that whereas this Stealth is like a big heavy GT car with a lot of power, the base 944 is a little go-kart that is worth every penny. And right now, they are worth, you could still pick up a low mile, very nice example for under 20 grand. And I think that for that reason, it is a great value still in this market. So our next car is the base 928. Now, this applies to all model years of this car. They made it for a while for a few reasons. It's a V8 Porsche. They weren't the most reliable engines, but they are an awesome looking, sounding car. It was a flagship Porsche. They were made to replace the 911, so the interior quality is good for the 80s and 90s. I mean, the 928 is another car it's basically everything you get out of a 944, but more. I haven't driven one of these, unlike all the other cars on this list, but you could still pick up, I had no idea about this until I checked, but you could pick up I found an example of one sold in November that was not only restored, but only had 30,000 original miles on it, $19,000, $20,000 for that car that is rapidly appreciating, like the base 944. They are both appreciating, and not only are they appreciating, but they are still a good value, because when you think of what you could spend $20,000 on in the sports car world, you're not going to get anything as prestigious, I guess, or as rare, as, cool looking, thoroughly engineered, if you keep everything in tip-top shape, and as unique and just, I guess, soulful is a good word for $20,000 than these two cars. So, moving on to our third car, something a little bit more modern, is the first generation 986 Boxster S. I drove one of these cars, and I have a 996, and whereas the Boxster S is noticeably slower. It is faster than, I have a non-turbo Stealth, which is a 220 horsepower V6. The 250 horsepower or thereabouts that you get from the 3.2 liter in the Boxster S, worth every penny, I'm telling you. Over the 2.7 base Boxster engine of the first generation, for a car that weighs well under 3,000 pounds, it's convertible, really stiff chassis, it's got pretty much the same front suspension as a 996. It is a very undervalued car. Once again, never gonna make anything like it again. Modern cars feel huge compared to them. They are a ton of fun. They sound amazing with the top down, especially the S with that bigger engine. You basically get a car that, in the Boxster S, sounds like a 911. You have the top down, and it's more nimble and fun on the street. They're a little harder to service than a 911, but you can still, they're old enough that you could still access enough of the engine on your own, if you know how to work on them, it's not too cumbersome. So that's why I think you can get these for still $15,000, $18,000 for a really nice 986 Boxster S that is going to only go up from here. Once again, think of the Miata that you can get from that price. Even a new Miata is slower than a first generation Boxster S. I've driven them both. I can tell you confidently, I don't care what numbers say, it's faster around corners, it feels way more balanced, it sounds a lot better, and it is faster in a straight line. The first generation Boxster S is, slept on as a budget Porsche, but take advantage of that. It is an amazing car. Our fourth car on this list is a bit of an obvious one. It's the 996. You could still get a very, very good 996 for under 30 grand, and I think that is nothing to sneeze at because it's a 911. It is the cheapest 911 you can buy, and I have plenty of videos on my channel that go into why it is every bit as fun, if not more fun. It's every bit of an enjoyable experience owning a 996 and driving a 996 as it is to any other 911. I preferred it to the 997 Carrera S that I drove because even though the 997 is a better car on the road, there's something so unique and just fun feeling about driving a 996. And they're only going up. They are going up rapidly, and it's not gonna stop. So if you wanna get into the 911 owning experience, that's the best way to do it. They're still undervalued. Unlike the Boxster, you could do most servicing on this car yourself. It's really easy to access the engine. So yeah, there are things you might have to lift it up for, like oil changes, but you can do it. It's easy. That applies to the Boxster too. In fact, some people even do their oil changes in their 996s without lowering them if it's at stock ride height, and you can't do that in a Boxster. Especially the first four cars that I've mentioned, people should not be deterred by the fact that 2 years ago, all these cars were significantly less valued. They are still four of the cheapest models of Porsche that you can buy. I think that is an important thing to note because they are only going to keep going up. In this market, with all things considered, they are still good deals. And that leads me to my last entry on this list, which is, surprisingly, the 997 Carrera, base Carrera, manual. I've driven an S, I've never driven a base Carrera. I will say that for a car that has the same engine as the 996.2, there was no S with the 996, and has a lot of the suspension components from the Carrera S, it is undervalued. They are, I think, on average $5,000 to $7,000 less than the S, and it's an engine that's less prone to issues. This is only the 997.1, by the way, because those 3.8 liter engines are the most susceptible to bore scoring and very costly engine rebuilds. Whereas this car is just a wild improvement in terms of usability and, for a lot of people, looks and reliability to the 996.2. And nowadays, for a nice one, the price difference between a 996.2 that's in really good condition and a 997.1 base Carrera that's in good condition, is not that much. And for people who care about how the car looks and really care about it looking more modern or really want that more usable experience, I mean, the value difference between a 996.2 and a 997.1 Carrera isn't that big, and I think it's a worth it one. And eventually, you know, as much as I love the 996, 997s are, you know, they didn't have any bad stigma towards them ever. So I think that eventually they're going to be looked at as one of the greatest generations of 911, and right now they are appreciating, but I think that there is more to go. And in a world where getting a new 911 is at least $120,000, definitely more with options, I mean, and the wait is almost a year because of production shortages. A 997 doesn't look much different, and it's a quarter of the price or less in some cases for a car that arguably is more fun to drive and not much less usable. So once again, these are just my opinions, and they are subject to disagreement. Please tell me your thoughts below on these cars, your experiences with them. If you think that they are gonna stay where they're at, maybe people shouldn't buy these cars, maybe there are things that make them not worth it, or things that I missed, cars that you guys think people should look at instead, please do comment that below. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, camera.